Hi, this is Etienne de la Buissy with the Art of Liberty Foundation. Welcome to our Sunday night live stream, which is something I think we're going to begin doing more and more of. For those that aren't familiar with the Art of Liberty Foundation, we are a startup public policy organization exposing the illegitimacy and the criminality of government. Essentially, our thesis is government was never intended to protect life, liberty, and property. Government is best thought of as a technique for robbing and controlling society, and as voluntarists, we don't believe that government is legitimate, desirable, or necessary. And so we are advocates of something called real freedom, and there is a real freedom movement all around the world. In some cities and towns, it is much stronger than others. But there are, voluntarists and libertarian and freedom-oriented groups all around the United States. And so what we wanted to do is we wanted to have a little bit of an overview of how do you find that freedom movement, and if that freedom movement isn't active in your town or city, well, then how do you create it yourself so that you can find your liberty friends and your liberty allies? And I wanted to really kind of start off just by telling you, why that's so important. But before I wanted to do that, I wanted to introduce CounterForce Alliance, our partners in this event. And CounterForce Alliance helps liberty groups grow, provides tools so that they can be successful, and provides training for people that want to take their Liberty group to the next level or want to learn how to become a facilitator of a Liberty group. And so I'm going to be joined with the team from Counterforce Alliance, and we're going to give you an overview. And with that, I think we'll start sharing the slides. And so, Haley, if you wanted to kick it off and kind of begin sharing our deck, I wanted to kind of get started and just really, go over why it's so important to have a liberty group and to have freedom groups in the, in the United States and in the world. And my example is something that happened during the COVID, where we helped organize resistance to the economic warfare of the COVID, the lockdowns in Santa Cruz, California. And Haley, if you could put it on the third slide, I wanted to talk about what success looks like and why this is so, very, very important. And so, when the COVID kicked off, I found myself in Santa Cruz, California, which is a story in and of itself. And people were still trying to kind of figure out what's going on, what's happening to, in the United States and the world. And myself and David Rodriguez, who many people know from the Education Options Summit or the Gatto Project, or helping students graduate and get out of the government school system through Valor Academy, where he speed graduates people out of the system so that they can get on with their lives, and some kind of vocational education or whatever. We end up at a little dinner party of about 10, 30, 20 something, 30 something folks, and where everybody's trying to figure out what's going on with the COVID. And so we begin, David and I are like, well, I think we've got an idea of, we've got an intergenerational organized crime problem. They've been lying to the country about everything from what happened in the Gulf of Tonkin to what happened, on 9/11, to what happened with Kuwaiti babies, tossed out of incubators during the Gulf War.
I I want to, sorry, I apologize. People are saying that they can't see the slides. Are they live right now?
We are live, and so they should be getting the slides, and I'll let Dren work on that. But it sounds like they can hear me, and so I'll keep talking and keep going over it while Dren figures out, out the slides. But back to my story on Santa Cruz is that we had kind of we knew the government and the media were couldn't be trusted, about why the what happened in the Gulf of Tonkin, or Kuwaiti babies tossed out incubators, or weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. So there was no reason to believe the government and the media that there was a pandemic. And so we began organize. We made a decision at that dinner table with about 10 people that we were going to organize resistance, that we were going to begin investigating this ourselves. And so that initial 10 people, we began putting out feelers. We began, like we scheduled a barbecue and a potluck at somebody's house the next week. And the next week we had 20 something people, and we began going into the hospitals and what the LA Times said was the epicenter of COVID in California. And we found empty waiting rooms, empty hospitals. We interviewed the guy that was doing the testing. He told us flat out they weren't experiencing pandemic conditions. He told us flat out that they weren't even testing, that not many people were coming in for testing. And if you know anything about Santa Clara in California, there is a huge Chinese community. They're coming back and forth from the valley. If there really was a pandemic, you would see it in Santa Clara, California, because of the back and forth between the valley and China. And so we found hospital employees that were openly speculating the whole thing was a hoax. And so we were convinced that it was hoax. Now, keep in time that at the time the hospitals had emergency tents, and they were full scale pretending that there's a pandemic. And so we began exposing literally on camera, look, these tents are empty. There's nobody in here. There's nothing going on at these hospitals. And we began fighting back and organizing resistance. And within 2 weeks, like within a week's time, like I said, we had 20 something people. By the end of the third week, we had 37 plus people marching through the streets in Santa Clara, passing out leaflets, exposing the hoax of the whole thing, exposing that masks weren't going to do anything, even if there was a pandemic. And we began trying to get businesses open because we viewed the whole thing as economic warfare against the population. Now, we very, very quickly, by the fourth week, we had over 200 people in a Facebook group, and we began routinely turning out 60, 70 plus people to peaceful civil disobedience events. Some of these were free hug events. Some of these we were reopening the beaches. We would go and we would reopen parks. We would tear down the tape that was, that had been wound around the jungle gyms and the equipment. We would they put some locks on parks. We didn't just cut the lock off. We went with bolt cutters and we cut the U-bolt off that held the lock to the gate, so they just couldn't put another lock on it. And we began having these beach parties because they were trying to close down the beaches, and we would step forward with 60, 70 people in a bullhorn, and we're reopening this beach, and 60 to 70 people would move forward, and the police would come. And the police would say, "Hey, y'all can't be here. The beach is closed." And we would calmly and politely explain to the police that no, you don't have the right to close down the beaches. You're the person. You're the bad man. You're threatening people with violence over something that's not really a crime. And we stood down the police 8 times in 8 weeks that I was there. We won. The police would get huffy, and they would sometimes they would ask everybody for ID, and nobody would give them ID, and then they would eventually leave, and everybody would see what was going on, and we were having fun. We're playing badminton, we're surfing, we're doing guitar. People are singing with guitars. People are having a blast. And it became clear that really nothing was going on. Like people would watch us, and over time they realized, hey, this is the group that you want to be with. These guys know what's going on. These people are organizing resistance, and it grew. And ultimately, the county public the health officer, a woman named Gail Newell, in the LA Times, and you can go see the story today, ultimately said, we're giving up on trying to close the beaches. We're giving up on trying to, to enforce this policy because the people refuse to be governed in this way. Now, a couple of other things that we did that I think are key is that we created videos of us going into supermarkets without masks, and we would go in 20 people at a time, and Trader Joe's, which we called Trader Joe's, would, their employees would try and stop us, and we would just walk around them because there's 20 people doing it together, and we would pick up all the groceries that we wanted, and we would do what's called a cash drop, where we'd figure out how much money was owed, and we would drop the money on the cash register and just take the goods. And those videos went viral, millions and millions of views, and they ultimately had to stop doing that. One other funny thing is that some local organization tried to give Gail Newell, the county health officer that was imposing these draconian lockdowns when there obviously wasn't, a pandemic going on. They tried to give her an award, and the Santa Cruz voluntarists pull up on a trailer right in front of the event, and the Funky Fathers of Liberty, who many of whom were in our group, have a full, sound system, drum kit, and they began playing a song that they'd written called Gale to Jail, and disrupt the entire event while the rest of our Liberty group passes out information on the harmfulness of the vaccines, the experimental nature of the vaccines, and why you didn't really want to do this because there's no pandemic going on at all. Now, I would go on and I would leave Santa Cruz, and I would go and I visited over in 2020, I was in 20 different states. And in 2030, I was in 30 different states, and I would meet with other Liberty groups all over the country. And some of these Liberty groups were libertarian. The majority of these Liberty groups were conservative. All of these Liberty groups weren't wearing masks, and almost every single Liberty group that I went to had some connection to a hospital in that area where some of the members of that group were either doctors or nurses or EMTs or worked in the hospital or knew somebody that worked in the hospital. And in 20 different states in 2020 and 30 different states in 2021, I never ran into a single person that worked in dozens and dozens of hospital employees, like I said, doctors, nurses, EMTs, etc., that claimed that they had pandemic conditions at their hospital. And so it really was, a government and a media hoax designed to transfer, money to these pharmaceutical companies and to get a needle into people's arm that ended up hurting, a whole bunch of people. And so my point here is that having that network in your community is very, very important should they ever try that again. But it's also very, very important because, it's hard to explain to somebody what's going on when they're getting all of this information from every single screen that government's legitimate, that government's desirable, that government's necessary, that we wouldn't have, civilization would crumble. It would be, the purge anarchy in the streets if there wasn't a government. And you really have to have a network of people, some of whom understand economics, some of whom understand philosophy, to really drive this point home and really, help people understand, the freedom philosophy. And so what I wanted to do is I wanted to just kind of take everybody through kind of the basics of like, how do you, so my son, so if you don't know where that, that organization is in your town, then the first place to start is at the Art of Liberty at ArtOfLiberty.org. And and on our website, we have a tab in the About section called Liberty Groups, and we have a listing of all of the Liberty groups that the Art of Liberty Foundation knows about. and you can go and see if there is a liberty-oriented organization in your town. And we also have links to other kind of we'll call them consolidators that have like there's a group called Liberty on the Rocks, and Liberty on the Rocks has kind of libertarian oriented drinking events. Get it? Liberty on the Rocks. In over, I want to say almost 10 plus cities in the United States, and then very, very popular in Colorado, where they have, like, where the average chapter has hundreds of people, and they regularly turn out like events with like 50 plus people. There is the Soho Forum in New York City. There is the Menlo Forum in Silicon Valley in Menlo Park. There are a variety of different, very well established and in some cases, very prestigious meeting of where they've got world class speakers. And so you're going to find, like I said, that list at artofliberty.org. But also we've got links to groups like Freedom Cells, which has a map where you can either search in your hometown, or you can post a link, and you can do this anonymously. You don't have to put your exact address, you don't have to put your exact name, but you can begin to kind of network with the Freedom Cell community, who are overwhelmingly libertarian, to be able to to find those groups that are in your town. Now, let's say that you don't have one of those in your town. And so some of my checklists of success is, number one is to find a kind of cool place to meet, and ideally a recurring date. And so, to get traction, it needs to, you want to try and have everybody meet on the same day, whether that's the second Saturday of the month, or whether that's the third Thursday of the month. And then people, can kind of plan on that, ahead of time. You get started with a nucleus of your friends, family, colleagues, neighbors, others. So you reach out to your existing social circle. You say, hey, I'm worried about what's going on in the country. I'm worried about, masked ICE goons on the street, and the surveillance and the flock cameras and everything that's going on. I wanted to get everybody together, and really there's a variety of places where you can market this event. And so some of those are Meetup, Facebook events, Eventbrite. We don't trust Meetup. We believe they're censoring freedom-oriented events. We believe they're in freedom-oriented groups. So be aware of that. But I like the full court press. I think you should do it all. Like, you should be on every single channel that would help you find people within your area. And so really, I call it the full court press. Be on every channel. Have a Facebook event. So that you can share it easily on Facebook. Some of that, but also count on that may be censored, that you may be shadow banned, that they may not share it the way that you would want to do. And so really, physical flyers are the gold standard. And so, having both a physical flyer and a digital flyer. This is an example of a digital flyer on the screen, and this is from the Voluntarists of Austin. And the Voluntarists of Austin on Meetup, they've got a Meetup group with over 1,000 people in Austin, Texas. And so, a lot of, you might be surprised that there's already a group, in your town, and that group might have 1,000 plus people in it, like the Voluntarists of Austin. A digital flyer is just simply something that can be shared. The details of the organization. A website is great, but if you don't have a website, then the Meetup page, the Facebook event page, your Facebook group, whatever that, you need to have some kind of landing page. CounterForce Alliance will take you through the tools that they have to help you organize a group as well. And so we're going to get into that here in a little bit, but you want to be able to share it, so the physical flyers, they go into any place that's got a community bulletin board. They go any place that, coffee shops, comic book shops, the cool hipster area in your town, bars, pubs, everybody knows their town and where people like to gather and where those would be successful, but plan on having a digital version as well so that you can share this so that not only you can share it, but your friends, your colleagues, your nucleus of the group can text it to their friends and colleagues, and you can share it through Telegram and SMS and Facebook and those avenues as well. Almost every newspaper has this is what's going on the weekend or an events thing, and sometimes those are free to list your event in, and sometimes those are very kind of low cost. But again, I recommend using every venue, and and most people have a local kind of what's going on in the concert scene and the bars and the pubs and everything. And in Memphis, where I live, it's called the Memphis Flyer, and those are the free publications that you find in the free bins at bars and restaurants and taverns and things like that. They have event listings as well. Give yourself a month. Like get like once you start with the things that have the longest draw time, like an event listing in the newspaper, like an event listing in the local what's happening paper, and then build to that date the things that are going to give you the best. And then, like I said, I mentioned Freedom Cells and the Connector app. Haley, take me to the next slide. And so then that's really the kind of the best practices of getting your group off the ground is marketing it effectively and getting getting to people that are there. Now, so now you get people there. So now, people show up, okay? And now what do you want to do? And well, number one, plan on it taking some time. Okay. So your first, one, might only have 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 friends. Be in it to win it, be in it for the long haul, especially if you're starting it in the summertime where people are traveling, where people are on vacations. Mix it up. Sometimes have speakers, sometimes have a documentary night, sometimes have potlucks. Don't just make it about the problems with flock cameras and your or inflation. Don't people come to this because they're concerned about what's going on with the government. They stay because they like the people and they have a good time and they begin to build friendships, and just keep that in mind is what you want to do. You want to make it welcoming for people. You want to make it so that people can want to come back and want to be with the people, and that's where you're going to attract. That's how you're going to attract people that other people want to be around, and that's how you're going to make it cool. And that's what we did in Santa Cruz. Is it was the cool kids club, and people wanted to be part of it, and they realized that hey, there was the government's lying. There's nothing to be worried about. These people are having a blast. They've been doing it for weeks. None of them have COVID. I'm I want to be with those people. I don't want to be locked in my apartment by myself. So split up the duties so that no one gets burned out. So like there's if you're gonna have a calling tree, don't have the same person do all the calls every week. Try and like maneuver the duties so that one person's in charge of marketing, one person's in charge of flyers, putting up flyers or whatever it is. So create a team. Um, and that's really my advice there is to make it as fun as possible. That's why our group thrived. That's why we had so much success, is people wanted to be a part of it. They had a good time, and we had a blast doing it. So everybody else is like locked up in their homes, and we are having like like Liberty bonfires and good. And so now really what I wanted to do is I wanted to introduce Haley with CounterForce Alliance, and she's going to tell you a little bit about CounterForce Alliance and how they create and help people start groups. They provide tools for groups, and like I said, they help you. They can help train you to be an effective facilitator and a group leader if you so desire. And so I'd like to turn it over to Haley with CounterForce Alliance.
All right, thank you, Etienne. So what I'm going to end up having to do, can you screen share? I stopped screen sharing. Can you screen share from your end, the PowerPoint presentation?
Let's see. Yeah, just got to get it up for a second.
Yeah.
But go ahead and introduce yourself while I.
Yeah. So thanks for that, great example of what you guys did in Santa Cruz, and it was inspirational. And I think what we're going to talk about, from our end is how we can replicate that, from everybody, because I think that was one of the, well, it was a learning moment for all of us about how we failed as a liberty movement, because you guys did a great job, but for the most part, we were behind the eight ball when it came to organizing and activism, at the biggest moment of our life, like tyranny here in the real and now, and not just some hypothetical future, and how we can make sure that that never happens again. So, I'll just kind of piggyback off of what you were talking about, where we are now in the freedom movement, and the Substack article that we wrote about isolation and to action. So right now, a lot of people, freedom-minded people, are frustrated or overwhelmed, or that's what they're feeling like, but that's really just a counter cover for feeling isolated. And isolation's not just emotionally draining, it's strategically dangerous. And again, we saw that during COVID. You guys managed to solve that problem, but most of us didn't. We felt like one man on an island. We felt like we didn't have, support of any kind. And like we're the only ones that are like the sane people around here. Everybody else is like the world's gone insane. Um, and we felt like the only sane ones in the insane asylum. But that's strategically dangerous. But freedom, what we've discovered, it's not meant to be pursued alone. And community doesn't happen by accident; it happens by intention, and that's what we're our aim is to do at CounterForce Alliance, is to build community intentionally and not by accident. So there we go. So I'm going to get started on slide 7 about why it feels like we're losing, but we aren't. So, yeah. So a lot of people in our community, let's face it, they've taken the black pill, and let's be real. It's hard not to see what's going on in our country and not feel a little bit demoralized. Like we see what's happening, we see the news, and we have this feeling that evil is winning, or that the globalist agenda is just unstoppable. Um, Etienne, can you get to slide 7?
Yeah, so I'm
That's it.
on.
Yep,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
one. And yep, and keep scrolling forward. So yeah. And the reason that is, the reason it feels like harmful agendas are winning is not because they're more numerous, but because they operate in coordination. So they move in tandem and they reinforce one another. And I know it's been an observation in politics for quite a while that those on one side of the political spectrum, they tend towards collectivism, and those on the other side tend towards more like radical individualists. And most of us here tend to fall on the latter side of that, the radical individualist side of that. And so, meanwhile, the freedom movement, and despite being filled with intelligent, principled, well intentioned people, we often operate in isolation. And everyone is doing something, but it often feels like we're just shouting into the void, like we're one man on an island. And we rarely act in unison together. And I always joke that anyone who's been in the freedom movement for more than 5 minutes and has ever tried to organize something to affect change, like it's a bit like herding cats, like it's rough. But that's not a sign of weakness. It just means that we're fragmented, and fragmentation is the real obstacle, not a lack of awareness. I dare say there's nobody here on this stream that's not painfully aware of the problems we're facing as a society. So the pattern that we get into is fragmentation, and fragmentation leads to isolation, and isolation leads to hesitation, which is just a combination of uncertainty and a lack of direction, and that equals stagnation. We just don't end up doing anything because we don't know what to do really. And so the solution is structure, leadership, and action. So the root problem is fragmentation. We're going to talk about that. So on slide 8, fragmentation problem. Why does it seem like the freedom movement is fragmented if so many are working hard to make it succeed? Um, if you can advance to slide 8, if we take a step back and really look at what's happening, there is a lot of commotion. There's noise, there's energy, there's conversation, but what we're lacking is momentum. And that's an important distinction because momentum requires people moving together in a shared direction. Right now, it seems like everybody's just trying to do their own thing. And it might even be meaningful, like something important, but without support, it's hard to sustain. So you have people out there who are either knowingly or unknowingly like duplicating work others are already doing. And again, it might be well intentioned, but it ultimately leads to more fragmentation. You're siphoning support off from one area and bring it to the other, and then nobody's able to reach the critical mass on any one initiative or endeavor. And over time, that leads to burnout. So ultimately, what we see, this isn't a lack of care, and that's not the problem. It's not that people don't care. People do care deeply. They're informed, they're engaged, they're trying, but there's no clear structure, no consistent support, and no accessible leadership. So all that energy stays fragmented. And when the energy is fragmented, it struggles to build anything into anything lasting. And that's the root problem that we're here to solve.
And I've got it on fragmentation leads to isolation now.
Yep, that's right. So, carrying on about the fragmentation problem, it's not that people don't care about freedom. People are researching, they're listening, and they're trying to understand what's happening. Probably now more than ever before, thanks to our digital age. And the proof of that, just look at the overwhelming number of podcasts, articles, conversations, conferences, like all this information, Substack blogs, etc. All this indicates that people are paying attention, but there's something that's missing despite all this information, despite all the awareness, so much awareness, it hasn't translated into coordinated action. And again, this leads to that fragmentation problem. And this fragmentation is aided and abetted by the pitfalls of our modern age. All the digital media that, in one way, is a blessing, like we're able to stay more aware and informed than ever before. But that nevertheless has kept us in a cycle of consumption rather than connection. And the paradox here is that despite having the world at our fingertips, like quite literally, these little algorithmic bubbles that we find ourselves in actually make our world feel smaller, not bigger. And on top of that, we have to worry about things like misinformation, which is so much harder to discern in the age of AI. We're still dealing with the issue of censorship, especially for groups like these trying to organize around freedom and liberty. So ultimately, what this leads to is that people start to feel alone in what they believe, even when millions of others feel the same way. And when that happens, we get stuck. We get stuck in these loops where we're inspired for a moment. Oh, that was a great podcast. Oh my gosh, he really nailed it. Or we hear a great talk. We read something powerful. Oh, that was a great Substack article you wrote. I totally agree. You hit the nail on the head. But then there's no clear path forward. There's no place to bring that energy. And so it all fizzles. It fizzles that energy, that momentum, that inspiration. And then over time, that fragmentation, that fizzling of energy, it leads to isolation. And isolation is what keeps movements from forming, even when there's a desire there to act. And that's what we're here to overcome together. So hesitation and uncertainty. Um, when we get into this fragmentation, isolation, hesitation cycle, this is where most people get stuck. The hesitation gets misinterpreted as apathy or blackpilling. It can look like people aren't stepping up, like they're disengaged or they're just not willing to get involved. Like, what's the point? But that's not actually what's happening. Most people aren't afraid of showing up, but they are afraid of stepping into something that feels unclear, unsupported, or unsustainable. And what most people are doing is they're making like an unconscious cost benefit assessment, or sometimes I like to say like effort to reward ratio. I like to weigh that out in my mind. Like, say for example, if 5G cell phone towers are your area of concern, you'd be like, yeah, I want to do something about these 5G cell phone towers in my neighborhood, but I mean, I don't know anyone else who's doing anything about it, and me going to my local city council meeting by myself isn't going to do anything. So like, why bother? Like that's kind of the attitude most people have. So when it looks like nobody else is doing anything about this, or whatever little group is trying to maybe do something is poorly organized, then hesitation becomes a natural response. And this isn't weakness, and it's not laziness, and it's certainly not a lack of courage, but it is a signal, and it's a signal that what we don't need is more outrage, and we don't need more information. What we need is support. We need structure. We need leadership, and most importantly, we need a clear, grounded path to take action, one that feels sustainable and not overwhelming. And when that exists, the hesitation starts to dissolve and the uncertainty shifts from clarity and into direction. So, our common barriers. What are some common barriers or shared hesitations out there in the freedom movement that like prevents people from taking action? And there are lots of them, but really, kind of the main ones boils down to three things. So, some people say things like, "Well, I know something's wrong. I just don't know where to start." Like, yeah, exactly. There's just so much. Where do we begin? Or another one's like, well, which issue even matters the most? Again, there's so much. Like, where do you start? Where do I even get started? Which issue do we tackle first? What's the low hanging fruit here? It's hard to know. And there's so much too that we all get pulled in a different direction. Like one person, it might be digital privacy. Another, it might be, medical freedom. Another person might be food sovereignty, things like that. So we're all, again, being pulled in different directions. And then one of the big ones too is, am I the right person to do this? Like, who am I? I'm just Haley Heathman. I mean, what am I supposed to do? And underpinning all of this is an unspoken fear, of what if I try and it doesn't go anywhere? And that's a common fear. Like maybe we've already seen it happen somewhere in our own circles where someone pours a ton of time, energy, and money into an endeavor, and it never takes off. Like despite all the effort, and you really try, and it's like a failure to launch. Or maybe they do gain traction, but still, despite their best efforts, they're unable to achieve the goal they set out to achieve. And that leaves you feeling even more demoralized, possibly than before. And these aren't excuses; these are real, honest reflections of what it feels like to stand alone without a clear path forward. But what that tells us is it's not that people are unwilling, it's just that they've been left without a way to step in that actually works to support their efforts. So, the critical reframe. In order to get people out of this defeatist thinking that prevents people from even getting started, this hesitation that we're talking about, this is where we kind of need to do a mindset reshift. We kind of need to think about things a little bit differently. And one of the big ones that we need to start with is that not everyone needs to be a leader. Everybody feels like, well, I can't take this on, but that's not actually what we need. I mean, we do need some of those, but they say too many chefs spoil the broth sometimes. So what we need in the freedom movement actually more is facilitators and activists. We need people who are willing to connect others, to create a little structure, or simply take the next step. Because let's face it, the real momentum doesn't come from one person having all the answers. It comes from many people doing small things consistently together. You don't have to have it all figured out. You don't have to be perfect. You don't need permission. You just have to be willing to say yes. You just have to be willing to try, because it's those small, steady action steps. And especially when you're in a supported team environment, that's way better than trying to delegate tasks and just figure it all out on your own. And so our mission, that leads me to our mission and who and what we are. What is CounterForce Alliance, and why are we here talking to you today? I'm Haley, and I'm joined here with John, Amy, and Christina from the leadership team to talk about CounterForce Alliance's mission and vision for the freedom movement. At CounterForce Alliance, our mission is fivefold. So, number one, we want to unify the freedom movement. We want to bring together individuals and local groups under a shared purpose. So, we, the people, move from scattered effort to coordinated collective impact. Two, educate. We want to educate members on self-sovereignty and independence. We want to provide access to trusted knowledge, tools, and experts so that people can build more independent, resilient lives without having to figure it all out on your own. Three, facilitate. We want to facilitate local groups and activism-focused efforts through task force teams. These are creating simple, accessible infrastructure for communities to organize, communicate, and take action together at the local level. Four, empower. We want to empower leaders at every level and equip everyday individuals with the mindset, skills, and support needed to step up, lead, and sustain meaningful efforts over time. Five, inspire. Of course, we want to inspire a culture of liberty. Politics, as we know, it's downstream from culture. So beyond just practical solutions to our everyday problems, which of course is important, we also want to create a culture that values freedom. And we can do this through things like, visual arts, music, short and long form videos, gaming, and everything in between. So in short, we provide the structure, connection, and support that turns intention into aligned, consistent action all in one place. So, our purpose, defined by our purpose. Everything we do is grounded in a shared purpose, in a very clear filter. And we're always asking, some of these questions. Does this build something real? Does this empower people beyond just talk? Does this unify instead of divide? Because if it doesn't do those three things, it's just noise. It's just a bunch of cheap, 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 and which we know is cheap, cheap, cheap. We also have to define what we are not. We're not a political party. We're not trying to create a fourth or fifth political party in the U.S. We're not an ideology, and in fact, we're actually trying to transcend all these ideologies. And we're not built around one voice. This is not a cult of personality or a brand. We are here to empower you, not a charismatic leader in charge of everything. This isn't about attention. It's not about entertainment. It's about alignment, action, and building something that actually lasts together. So if I had to boil it down to one sentence, CounterForce is about bringing community, focus, and leadership back to the freedom movement. And not in theory, but in a way that people can actually step into. Because this isn't something separate from you. This only works because of you. And we're not building it for people. We're building it with people. Because at the end of the day, we are all the counterforce. Now, what sets us apart? That's a good question. So that's one of the questions we get most often is there's plenty of other freedom-minded communities and networks out there. So what makes CounterForce Alliance any different? So any of you who have been in the freedom space for more than 5 minutes have probably felt at times disappointed and frankly let down at the lack of organization within our circles. And it's one of the things that I mentioned before that, the other side does way better than us because, as I mentioned before, they're collectivists, whereas we're mostly radical individualists. We have this sense that the freedom movement is scattered, divided, and hard to plug into. And, honestly, that's not wrong. That's a valid feeling. And what makes CounterForce Alliance different is that we're not here to add more noise or division. There are plenty of other freedom-minded networks out there, and most of them are just talk or meme lording. Let's create another meme. That'll do it. Yeah. Whereas we build, we empower, we unify. And we intentionally stay away from things that pull us apart and divide us, things like politics and headline news and labels. And instead, we focus on what actually brings people together, which is a shared pursuit of liberty and real practical solutions. We don't try to lead for you, we help you lead. And we believe the future of freedom doesn't come from the top down, it comes from you stepping in, taking action, and leading change in your own life and community. We are here to create a space where leaders and groups can collaborate and grow. And we do that by focusing on what truly matters: personal sovereignty, local resilience, and collective freedom. because this isn't just another movement. It is a space to actually build something real together. Our community frame, or so how CounterForce facilitates action, the community framework. So how does CounterForce Alliance actually help? What does that look like? What does the CounterForce community look like in practice? So think of CounterForce as the missing infrastructure, the framework that helps people move from being aware to connected to actually taking action, because the goal isn't just to inform people. Look, we all know we're well aware of the problems. It's to help us build together. And we do that in a few key ways. So first, through our local liberty groups. These are people so that people can connect in their own communities, and not just online, and turn shared values into relationships and action. Then we have our task force teams. These are focused, collaborative spaces where people come together around specific initiatives and actually get things done. Imagine that. And lastly, we have Liberty leadership, giving people the tools, support, and training to step up with confidence and lead in a way that's sustainable. And all of this is designed to answer that core problem that we've been talking about, to make sure that no one has to figure this out alone, and no effort is wasted. So, our community framework, what does this actually look like on the ground? At the heart of CounterForce is our community framework, and it starts with local liberty groups. And these are dedicated spaces where people can actually connect in real life, not just online. So, look, I know those in our community value their online privacy, as we all should. Like, that's really important. But at some point, we have to step away and step out from behind the shadow of anonymity so that we can take the next step of meeting people in real life. We need boots on the ground, so to speak. And this is where, in real life, you can organize, communicate, share resources, plan events, and most importantly, build real relationships with people in your community who care about the same things, because that's where trust is built. That's where the momentum begins. And the beauty of these local liberty groups is they're not one size fits all. There's lots of different things you can do with them. These can be social, like bringing people together casually for fun meet and greets, interactive, where they're centered on discussion and collaboration, educational, sharing knowledge through talks and lectures, or hands-on, like building real world skills, or working on local projects. It's going to evolve naturally as you grow, and it's based on the people, the needs, and the energy of that community, because we're not a top-down organization. It's decentralized. We're not trying to force a structure onto people or groups. We're just creating a framework that allows something real to grow. And one example of that is the San Diego Freedom Alliance, which is one of our own local liberty groups. And it's kind of the basis and the genesis, the catalyst of what kind of prompted this whole CounterForce Alliance movement, is the success that they've had in San Diego organizing their group. They started off as maybe a group of just a dozen or a couple dozen people, and they've swelled to almost triple digits. And they've done that by doing things like bringing in speakers and hosting conversations on everything from digital privacy to having people from the Weston A. Price Foundation come in and talk about health and nutrition, and developing real world activism strategies, and doing activism efforts in San Diego. And beyond that, beyond just activism efforts and everything, it's about personal growth and development too. So they're offering life path courses to help people find clarity, purpose, and direction. And they're also doing things like developing practical skills like time management. So it's not all heavy, and they also intersperse that with the fun things too, like movie matinees, community gatherings, like beach barbecues, shared experiences, and real connection. Because that's the point. This isn't just about information, it's about building relationships, skills, and momentum in a way that actually sticks. Focused activism. So, beyond the local liberty groups, our other secret weapon is our task force teams. And this is where connection starts to turn into real focused action. Our task force teams are built around specific issues, so people who care about the same thing can stop working in silos and start collaborating. So whether it's things like digital privacy, food independence, flock camera surveillance, alternative energy, or emerging issues like data centers and water rights. And that's a big one. That's a buzzword these days, these AI data centers. That's a big one. Each team has a dedicated space to share research, resources, ideas, and most importantly, coordinated action steps. So I'll give an example of that. I'm in Florida, in the free state of Florida. quasi-free at least. And what we did last year was we were made a concerted effort on getting fluoride out of the water in Florida. And it started off locally where, we would show up to, local city council meetings and commissioner meetings and petition them to start getting fluoride out of the water. And that was spurred on by, some of the work and the attention that RFK Jr. brought to it as in his role in the White House. And that helped build some momentum. And we were actually having success at that. We were having these county commissioners, city councils start to, vote to remove fluoride from the water. That compounded into being able to put forth a bill in our legislature to, get the fluoride out of the water at a state level. And ultimately that passed and was signed into law by Governor DeSantis. So this is something that you can replicate on a state by state basis. So, hey, we've had some success there. How can we take that success and let other people know about it? And that's how we can use these task force teams is like so that nobody has to just figure it all out on their own. They can take something like Florida and use as an example and a blueprint and figure out, hey, what's working and what's not working, which arguments are more persuasive than others. Because that's one of the biggest gaps we've seen of this is that people are working on the same problems. They're just not working on it together. So the task force teams change that. They bring some alignment and clarity and momentum to, making headway into some of these efforts. So the effort, it's not duplicated, but it's multiplied. And that's just the beginning. But wait, there's more. So from connection to impact, this is where everything starts to come together. Our task force teams, they don't just organize ideas, they create real connections between people who are ready to act. And when the right people find each other, things start to move. And we've already seen this in our CounterForce Alliance community. So about a month or two ago, we had a live stream with Brendan Traxel of Flock Out of Flag, which is an initiative, an endeavor to get flock camera systems out of Flagstaff, Arizona. And he was successful, actually. They actually got them removed. And he gave us, a great presentation on how exactly, with step-by-step actions that he took to get those flock camera systems out of Flagstaff. And after that, live stream that he gave, it's on our platform too. You can view that on our platform. We were able to help connect Brendan with a university student at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, and that connection is already turning into action on their campuses to push back against flock camera installations. And so that's how this grows. It's not a top-down effort, but it's through aligned people finding each other, sharing strategies, and stepping forward together. That's how we make a difference and have an impact. And the great thing is that that's just the beginning. So piggybacking off of that, like building the momentum with the flock camera systems, this summer, we're actually going to be actively working to find and connect other student-led groups and local efforts to stop flock at colleges and universities across the country so that no one is operating in isolation and every effort becomes part of something bigger. Nobody's starting off from square one. We can collaborate and communicate with each other about how we can, carry this momentum forward. And that's what CounterForce Alliance is here for, not just for sharing information, but helping activists find each other and build something real in the real world. Stepping into leadership. So this is where it becomes personal. At CounterForce, we're not just here to connect people. We are also here to help people step into leadership in their own communities. One of the misconceptions about leadership is it's not about having all the right answers. It just means someone that's willing to take responsibility for the next step. And the way we support that is through real practical training, like things like how to facilitate a group or how to set expectations, how to delegate and sustain momentum over time. So we've got courses that are help you learn how to do all that. We also provide courses and tools to help you grow in communication, organization, time management, and advocacy. So you're not just guessing your way through it. Like you're supported all the way. If there's something you don't know how to do, or maybe you're a little bit weak on, we've probably got a course on there. We're creating a course to help you figure out how to do it. But importantly, while all those leadership skills are important, they're not anything if we don't have the proper value systems to carry them out. So we need to act with integrity. We're teaching about personal responsibility, truth, and service to others, because those are really the foundations of any free society and the kind of leadership that actually lasts. You don't want, it doesn't mean anything to achieve our objectives if we do it by, throwing people under the bus and hurting other people. That's not what we're about. It's about how to act in integrity while making, headways and momentum for freedom. At CounterForce, we don't lead for you, we help you lead. And we give you the structure, the support, and the tools to help you step forward and lead. Because at the end of the day, CounterForce was born out of a need for real leadership, direction, and focus. And it grows through people who care about their communities and are ready to take action together. All right. Now, so there might be some of you on the stream who are already leading. If you're already a leader, great. That's awesome. Congratulations. Thank you for stepping up. And so this is where CounterForce becomes a force multiplier for what you're already doing. So if you've already taken the step to show up, already taken the steps to organize something and to carry responsibility, we're here to support you and to help you do it more effectively and sustainably. So for those who are already leading a local group or specific initiative, we provide you with training that will help you become an even more effective leader and activist to arm you with the tools, strategies, and skills to keep your group growing and become more resilient. So you're not just working hard, you're working more strategically, work harder, work smarter, not harder, right? You'll also be able to connect with other leaders on the network so you guys can exchange strategies, resources, and experience with others who are leading alongside you. As a Liberty leader, you'll be provided with structure needed to be more successful, a dedicated and customizable space on our network to manage your group, including features such as an event calendar, forums, file sharing, members directory, alerts, reminders, and more. You'll get one space for your local group, and also you'll get up to 2 task force team spaces to address specific issues or solutions you are focused on. Because leadership shouldn't feel like you're holding everything together on your own. It should feel supported, connected, and built to last. Our collective impact. All right, what it's all about here at CounterForce Alliance in our mission is to empower you, our collective impact. Everyone has something unique to offer. Your voice matters. Your skills, your talents, your perspective, they matter now more than ever. And what matters most is choosing not to retreat, not to feel defeatist, not to get blackpilled, but to participate, to step up, to step in and build alongside others who care. Different people, different strengths coming together with a shared purpose for freedom. And together, we create something far more powerful than any of us could do alone, because it all starts with you. So some examples of taking action. So action doesn't have to be big to be meaningful. I think that's a misconception. And another one of those things that causes hesitation is thinking that in order to be meaningful, we have to do something like take down Klaus Schwab at the WEF. I know he's already been taken down, but that's just an example. But, we don't have to be toppling world leaders in order to take meaningful action. Small actions are just as important. And those small actions can look like things like supporting a local co-op, growing your own food, bartering for goods and services, showing up to a task force, or just simply starting conversations in your community. These are some of the simple, tangible steps that people can take that really make a difference. They really matter, because real change isn't built on one big moment. And I'll put this in a quote. So if anyone's ever read The Hobbit by Tolkien, so there's a great quote from Gandalf the Grey, and he goes, "Some people believe it is only great power that can hold evil in check, but that is not what I have found. It is the small, everyday deeds of ordinary folk that keep the darkness at bay, small acts of kindness and love." And that's exactly what we can accomplish through our CounterForce Alliance community. So moving from isolation to connection, as we close, I want to come back to where we started, that feeling of isolation. So if you've ever felt like you've been carrying this alone, you're not alone. I'm here to tell you that you're not alone. Your skills, your voice, your perspective, they're all needed now more than ever. And CounterForce exists because freedom isn't meant to be pursued alone. It's built through connection, through shared effort, small, steady steps forward. You don't have to have everything figured out. You don't need to lead tomorrow. You just need to take the next step. With CounterForce, that isolation becomes community. The hesitation becomes action, and individuals become activists and leaders. So, if that resonates with you, we'd be honored to build alongside you. And there's no time like the present, as they say. Our time is now. Now. There's never been a more important moment than right now. You can feel it in the air these days. The tension, the uncertainty, the sense that something's not right. It's tangible, it's palpable. And despite all the promises, sorry, not much has truly changed. And if anything, many of our freedoms are slipping faster than we expected. At some point, we have to face reality. No one is coming to save us. Facts, facts. And that's not meant to create fear, but it is meant to create clarity. Because we've seen what happens when we're unprepared, when we don't have strong communities, coordination, or a plan. We talked about that with regards to the COVID response. I mean, Etienne and his group were prepared, but most of us weren't. Most of us were, like I said, the only sane person in an insane asylum. And, that led to bad outcomes. And we can't let that happen again. We can't be caught, unawares, stuck behind the 8 ball again. So this is the moment to step forward, to find your people, to take action, however small it may seem, because silence becomes consent. Every step towards freedom matters. The fear we feel comes from isolation, and the way we defeat that is through action. There is another path forward, and it starts with us. It's up to all of us to decide what happens next. So, taking the next step. Are you ready to take action? Are you ready to get off the sideline and get into the game? Are you ready to stop being a keyboard warrior and put some boots on the ground? This is the one area where we want some boots on the ground. Yes, indeed. So if something you've heard today resonated, then this is your moment. We want you to join the CounterForce community. Start connecting, engaging, start building. Find a local group or start one. Join a task force that you care about. Step up where you can. Every contribution matters. Just take the next step, because consistent collective action creates real change. And if you're ready, we're here. We're ready to build with you. Your next step starts here. So if you've made it this far in the presentation, we really thank you for sticking around. At this point, we are going to open it up to some Q&A. And if there have been any questions that have been put in the chat box, we're going to go through those. We've been monitoring that in the chat. And if you haven't, now's your chance to put something in the chat box now. Maybe something like, what's your biggest concern? Like something or question about our platform, something personal like, hey, I'm feeling hopeless or overwhelmed. How can this help? And then we'll share openly from our side what we've learned and what we're building. So we're ready to have a conversation. I'm going to kick it over to John, who is the mastermind, the man with the plan, the genius behind all this madness. And he and Christina are going to be taking questions and answering all your questions. So John and Christina, if you want to take it over from here.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I see a question here about whether or not we have any courses on freedoms. And yes, we have one in the works, and it's very much in depth. And I believe it's going to change a lot of people's minds, especially in regards to getting out of the left-right paradigm. Because we, as the CounterForce community, we're very much focused on freedom. And the party politics just isn't working, as Etienne has been preaching for years now. So we're just so happy that he's brought us on board. And if there's any more questions, we're here to answer them.
Hey, John, while we're waiting for some questions to appear, could you go ahead and just give everybody an overview of what you've been able to do in San Diego and some of the success that you've had and how that got started, and any kind of best practices that you've seen have been successful in your group, and just a little bit about your group?
Sure. Well, our group was started on the Freedom Cell Network, and it was during COVID, right at the beginning. It was actually started by another lady named Sherry, and she had some issues in her family, and I just kind of took over, just keep the group going. And I've been doing it ever since. She just said, "John, you're doing so good. Just take over." I said, "Okay." So It's been about 5 years. I do most of the speaking. We do lectures. We have guest speakers. We do some social events, and we just try to mix things up and keep it interesting. So we've grown over the years, and people are very happy with what we've done. So we're trying to take what we've built over the last 5 years and get it out to the freedom community. Um, but I've learned that keeping things focused on freedom and focused on alternative solutions, that's what brings people together. Um, we have all different types. We have the whole political spectrum in our group: Democrat, Republican, everything in between, everything outside of the box. They're all coming to our meetings, and they're all friends, and they're developing relationships. Some people have changed their politics over the years as we've gone through different courses and material we've presented. So it's been a growing process for all of us, and I'm just excited to bring this to the world.
And I have been a presenter to the group, and so I'm an example
Yeah.
of one of those voices that you've been able to kind of bring to the table. What are if you had to really if somebody's like thinking about doing this in their own community, what do you like? What would you tell them? Like what do you think are the most important things for somebody that's sitting on the fence that's would like to kind of do this? What's the first thing they could do? What's your best advice for somebody that wanted to do this in their own community?
Take our courses. Just kidding. So start small. Start with just your inner circle of friends. If you have no friends that are like-minded to start a group like this, you're just gonna have to go online and see if you can find those people. If you go to Etienne's local groups page, or come to our community or Freedom Cells, and just try to find your tribe. But just if you just start with 2 people, that's enough. Just the 2 of you can meet in a coffee shop, and over time, you're going to meet other people, and you can start growing your group. And eventually, you can bring in guest speakers. You can mix it up by having social events. Like, we have a Christmas party every year at a nice restaurant, and that's always a blast. We invite musicians in our group to come and play. Just keep it, like Etienne said, keep it fun, keep it interesting. But you got to keep the focus on freedom and working towards activism efforts too. Otherwise, it's just, it's only a social event. We have members that are highly active in the local community, standing up against the flock cameras, 5G towers, and they're very successful. So we take what they've done and we learn from them, and then we spread that knowledge to everyone else, and then they in turn take it to their cities, and they can make things turn around for liberty.
Christina, do you want to chime in? Do you want to throw out your favorite suggestion for somebody that's getting started that wanted to put together a group in their city or town?
Yeah, first I wanted to say kind of what led us to this moment. When John and I first connected and started talking, it became evident very quickly that we both shared a similar vision of creating this way for people to come forward, connect with each other, become more self-reliant, learn the knowledge, learn the skills, get together, and pick their favorite issue and run with it. And so I'm very passionate about this project because I come from a small town and I know what it's like to wonder if you're ever going to find support, if you're ever going to find your tribe in a small town community, especially where there just isn't the numbers or population to support it. So if you're listening to this and you join our community, we can set you up with your own space for your town or your region or wherever you are. And yes, start with a few friends. If not, you might have to start online and kind of contribute to the freedom movement in that way until you can find your tribe that's locally around you. But in the meantime, we've got plenty for you to do. If you want to join us, even small steps, there's ways to contribute to the freedom movement, whatever your skills are, whatever your talents are. we need you because they're going to move forward with their agenda. They're going to keep moving forward. They're going to move forward, unite as a united front. And we need to do the same. We need to get together. And maybe it isn't going to be your friends. Maybe you're going to meet them later. Once you create a group or facilitate a group, and then you post at the library, you post at the coffee shop, hey, are you guys concerned about this? Like Flock, are you concerned about biometrics? Let's get together. Let's talk about growing some food. And this is what this is all about. We need to step forward in humanity. We need to step forward and take our rights back and start saying that we're not going to take this anymore. And the way we do it is together, step by step, big steps, small steps, every walk of life. We need you. We want you to join us. And you're more than welcome.
Well, thank you, thank you. Now, is there anything else that you guys, because we're at the end of our hour, is there anything else that the CounterForce Alliance team would like for folks to know, or is there anything that I forgot to ask you, or is there anything else that we should cover before we close it out?
I don't know if we want to put the last slide up. It's just got our QR codes for where people can find us and how they can join, and our invitation for action. The URL, counterforcealliance.com. Some QR codes that you can scan right now, so you can join. It's free to join. Let's put it that way. There are some membership tiers for those who want to be local Liberty leaders and lead task force teams, but anybody can join the platform, and that's the first next logical step that we want you to take for our movement. And it's not going to hurt you to just start connecting and meeting people, and go from there. So John, anything you want to finish off with about memberships or getting started?
I think that, one of our core philosophies that I didn't mention is that we try to focus on people and the local needs. So if you're starting a group or you want to start an effort, number one, focus on the relationships. That's the most important thing. If you make it about yourself or your agenda, people are going to see through that. So if you keep it focused on the people you're working with, it just creates a stronger bond between you. And also, as far as the group as a whole is concerned, is keep it about what that area needs or what that area needs to focus on. If flock surveillance is a big issue in your area, then go after it if that's what everyone else is on board for. So just keep it about what the other people are interested as well. You have to give and take. So it's all about relationship. All right, I hope that helps.
That was
And we're
that was
looking.
yeah, that was perfect. And I want to thank you guys. I want to thank everybody that joined us, and anybody that sees the live stream. Please scan the QR code to get more information. CounterForceAlliance.com, ArtOfLiberty.org. You can find our list of Liberty groups in your area in the About section under the Liberty Groups tab. And I hope everybody takes action. I hope everybody finds their tribe, and I hope everybody has a absolute blast with your new Liberty friends and tribe. Thank you for attending. It has been our pleasure to put this together for you.